Today, our national anthem will be sung by Stephen McNulty, Boston Police Department.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Invocation will be by Father Robert Casey.
Let us pray. God our Father, we ask your blessing upon us today on this 41st anniversary of the dedication of this memorial. Today, once again, Lord, we ask of your presence as we remember and honor our servicemen that died in Vietnam. We honor and remember also all those men and women who have lost their lives safeguarding our freedoms and assuring peace throughout the world. As we honor these brave soldiers who gave their life for our country and this community, we pledge never to forget, and we promise to do all in our power to promote peace throughout the world. We are also mindful today, Lord, of all those men and women serving here in our country and around the world in harm's way. We ask, Lord, that you watch over them, protect them, and bring them safely home. As we gather today, let our prayer be one of peace for our world, our country, our community, and our homes, and above all, for peace in our hearts. We ask all of this in God's name. Amen.
Thank you, Father Casey, and thank you, Steve McNulty. Please be seated if you have a seat. Commander Farrell, Governor Baker, Mayor Wu, Congressman Lynch, City Council President Flynn, State Senator Collins, Representative Beal, City Councilors Flaherty, Murphy, and our new District Attorney, Kevin Hayden, fellow veterans, Gold Star families, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome to the 41st rededication of the South Boston Vietnam Memorial. It fills me with no small amount of pride to know that over the past 41 years, we have kept faith with the 10 words carved at the base of this memorial. If you forget my death, then I died in vain. The community of South Boston has never forgotten, nor will it ever forget, the ultimate price 25 sons paid in Vietnam. It remains the highest casualty rate suffered by a community of our size in the country. We discovered that fact some 43 years ago when Harry Carroll, Tommy Irwin, Jerry Turner, George Egan, and myself sat down to discuss how to remember the friends we lost. Johnny Cole, Joe Desmond, Donnie Turner were boyhood pals and football teammates who journeyed to Paris Island like so many of us, to become Marines in 1967, bound for Vietnam, and it was there that they made ultimate sacrifice in 1968 and 1969. Joe Desmond was killed November 8th, and Johnny Cole was killed November 10th, and Donnie Turner January 2 months later. We learned all those years ago that seeking to honor the sacrifice and courage of Vietnam veterans could be a long and lonely endeavor. It wasn't fashionable to be a Vietnam veteran or build memorials to those that died in Vietnam. However, we were determined that the courage and sacrifice shown by our 25 friends should be honored just as the sacrifice of veterans of past wars. So, on a brilliant Sunday, September 13th, 1981, 41 years ago, a parade of Vietnam veterans proudly made its way into this park. They wore suits and ties, in a time in Vietnam represented only by the red carnation on their lapels. That welcome home moment we had went viral. It was beamed across the country. We set in motion a national rethinking of the Vietnam conflict, specifically the courage and dedication of all the men and women who served and gave their lives. Our memorial was consecrated and dedicated 14 months before the National Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. On that first Sunday, we in South Boston reminded the country that it could not forget a generation of veterans who, like their fathers before them, went off to fight in war, secure in the belief that their service, their sacrifice, and their dedication to the country would be honored. What those of us on the Memorial Committee hoped for 41 years ago, and what we received beyond anything we could imagine, was a perfect welcome home. For the past 41 years, we have focused our attention on 25 heroes, whose names are carved in the face of this memorial, and that is as it should be. But I ask you, before you leave today, to direct your attention to the back of the memorial and the words that are carved in this stone: to all the men and women who served during the Vietnam War, 1961-1975. Take a minute to think about those words. To all the men and women who served during the Vietnam War. I am so proud that we took the time and to make sure that everyone who served was recognized for their service and their sacrifice. Below those words are two words: welcome home. Two words that most Vietnam veterans never heard. But everyone serving in the armed forces today will hear them along with their thank you for your service. This is what makes this memorial unique. I want to acknowledge and recognize the veterans that you see standing guard around this fence. They all served with honor and pride and have been manning this fence every year, and I ask you to give them the respect and gratitude that they are due. To the men and women here today, thank you for your service. And I'll close with a quote: that poor is the nation that has no heroes. Shameful is the nation that has them and forgets. God bless our veterans. God bless America. And thank you all for being here today. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce our keynote speaker, our guest of honor, Commander Billy J. Farrell, Commander, United States Navy. Commander Farrell is a native of Podunk, Kentucky. She attended the United States Naval Academy and was commissioned in 2004 with a bachelor's degree in science political science. She was awarded her Master's of Science in Operations Management from the University of Arkansas in 2009. Her first division officer tour was aboard the USS Vela Gulf. After completion of her 2 division officers tours, Commander Farrell reported to Nav Com in Millington, Tennessee. And I know I probably screwed that up, Commander, but I was a corporal in the Marines, so this is all. She became the action officer in PERS 833. While there, she assumed the duties as a delayed section head and assistant board screener. After departing PERS 833, Commander Farrell started the department head pipeline. She reported to the USS San Jacinto in March of 2012 as the weapons officer. She then assumed the responsibilities as the combat systems officer on board. Her next tour was the Deputy Director for Professional Development at the United States Naval Academy. And after departing the United States Naval Academy, Commander Farrell reported to Commander Naval Service Force Atlantic as the Deputy 3. She previously served as Executive Officer on the USS Vicksburg. Commander Farrell's awards include 3 meritorious medals, 4 Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medals, 3 meritorious unit commendation medals. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 77th Commanding Officer of the USS Constitution, Commander Billy J. Farrell.
All right, good morning. I just told Tommy Navy bios are written for people that served in the Navy in a very specific language and sometimes need translation, so that's okay. You did great. I'm Commander B.J. Farrell, 77th Commanding Officer of USS Constitution, the oldest commissioned warship afloat, turning 225 later this year. And undefeated in battle with a record of 33-0. After 18 years of serving in the Navy as a surface warfare officer on board ships around the world, I was humbled to be given the opportunity to command a ship. The privilege to command any unit of our nation's all-volunteer armed forces is a responsibility not to be taken lightly, and carries with it the complete responsibility for those entrusted to your command. To make it even more humbling, the ship to which I have been entrusted to command is one of the 6 original frigates of our Navy. And not only that, it is the only one left standing with us today. USS Constitution, named for the document that governs our country, and the document to which many take an oath to support and defend. She is a symbol of our citizens' dedication and perseverance. She represents not only the sailors that gave their lives on her decks, but she also serves as a symbol to those that have made the ultimate sacrifice in fulfilling their oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I was recently at an event and heard a quote that stuck with me. A soldier can die twice. Once when he takes his last breath, and he dies again when he is forgotten. I was reminded of that quote today when I look at this memorial with the name of 25 men from South Boston who made the ultimate sacrifice. If you forget my death, then I died in vain. As we stand here today, let us not forget the sacrifice or those that died, and especially let us not forget those they left behind in our care. Behind every member of our armed forces is a family that supports them and carries the burden of not knowing if a loved one will return home. Mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, siblings, friends, to name a few, support our service so we can do the mission the nation needs. Thank you to our Gold Star families for your bravery and dedication in making sure your loved ones' stories live on. I offer you my deepest continued condolences and a promise to continue to share the stories of your loved ones that made the ultimate sacrifice in support and defense of the Constitution of the United States. To the Vietnam veterans with us here today, thank you for your service to our country, and welcome home. There was a naval message released in honor of Vietnam Veterans Recognition Day in March earlier this year. The words resonated with me then, and I would like to share some of them with you here today. To ensure the sacrifices of the 9 million who served during this difficult chapter of our country's history are remembered for generations to come, we will honor all those who answered our nation's call to duty. We vow to never again confuse personal disapproval of war with prejudice against those that honorably wear the uniform of our armed forces. We reaffirm one of our most fundamental obligations: to show all who have worn the uniform of the United States the dignity and respect they deserve, and to honor their sacrifice by serving them as they served us. Thank you for the sacrifices that you all made, not only during the war, but also after, to pave the way for those of us serving today. To those that gave the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our country, we salute you and vow to never forget that sacrifice. We are here to carry on the mission to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and to ensure your sacrifice is remembered not only today, but every day. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you all here today to continue the legacy of those that served during the Vietnam War, and especially to honor and remember the 25 names on this memorial. It is an honor and a privilege to serve in the United States Navy, and it is an honor and a privilege to serve as the 77th Commanding Officer of USS Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Farrell. We're fortunate, Commander, that we have a friend, fellow Marine, fellow Vietnam veteran that has become quite the artist. And Tom Steiner, who is known for his paintings. So on behalf of Tommy and all the Vietnam veterans, please accept Tom's painting of the Constitution as it sailed past Castle Island as a thank you for your being with us today. Thank you, Commander. The theme for today was reflection in memory. I had asked all our elected officials, rather than giving an official speech or talk today, that they take the time and select a name off the memorial and talk about that individual. I also asked several Vietnam veterans to give me a quote that captures what they think 40 years later. And I am humbled to say that everyone complied, and it's great that our elected officials reached out to family members to talk about someone from our memorial. It's my pleasure now to introduce the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, who is here. And I always make sure I say this, Charlie Baker, in 41 years, is the only governor to ever attend this ceremony. Please welcome Governor Baker.
So good afternoon. Let me start, Tom, by just saying that the idea that any of us would choose not to comply with the orders of the most influential corporal in the United States Marine Corps is pretty slim. And I also have to say that for me, and I'm sure for those that will come after me, this chance to speak a little bit about one of the folks on this wall is not just something that I would consider to be a request from you, but an honor to be asked to perform it. Now, before I get into my remarks, I do want to thank Donna, where are you, Donna, for spending time with me as I went through the process of trying to figure out what I might say about Don Turner. He's a Lance Corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was born on November 14th in 1947. He died January 21st, 1969, and he was 21 years old. Donnie was the youngest of 6 children. He was raised by his parents, Dottie and Buddy Turner, and his older brothers and sisters. His dad worked for A&P Fisheries down on the fish pier, and the family owned a triple-decker on 5th Street, in which the extended family took up all 3 floors. Donnie was a neighborhood kid. It's as simple as that. His family and the kids from the neighborhood were pretty much his entire world growing up. And as he got older, he hung out with a smaller group of guys and girls on the corner of N and 6th Streets. And that's where he met Donna Casiota. They played cards, they gave each other grief, they went to the movies, and they grew close to one another over a 3-year period of time. I do need to point out here, however, that Donna told me that when she was 9 or 10, her first boyfriend from the neighborhood was some kid named Tommy Lyons. I think we could all say that we're glad she was able and smart enough to move on from that one. Donnie was also a very good football player. He starred for the O'Connell Club and the Moakley Senators in the Boston Park League, and he coached the youth football programs in Southie with many of his teammates. After he graduated from South Boston High School in the spring of 1967, he and several of his friends joined the Marines. The Vietnam War at this point was in full swing. Southie had a long history of military service, and he and many of his friends decided that the best next move for them was to stand up and do the right thing on behalf of the country that had done so much for them. And soon after that, they were all off to Paris Island. After he left, Donnie and Donna missed each other a lot. They talked once in a while by phone. They wrote to each other once in a while, mostly stuff about the neighborhood. And that fall, Donnie called and asked Donna to marry him. She didn't think about it very much. She just said yes. So when he came home for Christmas, Donnie and Donna got married on December 23rd, 1967. Then they had a big party, which was part Christmas and part wedding celebration. And then he went back to California to finish his training. Donnie had one more leave around St. Patrick's Day, which, as we all know, is kind of a big day in South Boston. And when the fun and games of that weekend were over, he went back to California, and from there, soon after, he was on his way with many of his friends from South Boston to that war in Vietnam. Donnie Jr. was born on December 20th, 1968, almost a year to the day after his parents were married. Donnie Sr. heard about it from the Red Cross, who originally told him that Donna had twins. I'm sure that came as a bit of a surprise to Donnie. The Red Cross corrected that shortly afterward and let Donnie know that Donna, in fact, had one child, a baby boy, Donnie Jr. The Turners were now a family, and who knows what thoughts raced through the minds of these 2 young kids. Unfortunately, we will never know the answer to that question, because Donnie Sr. was killed in action 1 month later, on January 21st, 1969, the day that Richard Nixon took the oath of office to become President of the United States. 2 days after that, Donna was attending her niece's birthday party when two Marines, a priest, and Donnie's older brother, Buddy, showed up and delivered the horrible news to her about Donnie. The rest of that day, that week, that month, that year, for Donna, was a blur. She was 20 years old. She just lost her husband. And she had a brand new baby. But Donna did what she needed to do. She worked with the military and with Donnie's family to organize the wake and the funeral. And she did the best she could to honor Donnie's memory and live up to the expectations others had about how she should respond to this gut-wrenching tragedy. But mostly she worried about Donnie Jr. The Turner family helped her find housing for the two of them in Quincy. She worked the best she could to move forward amidst the shocking turn of events. Now, a few years later, she met one of Donnie's old coaching buddies from Pop Warner, Billy Cashins, and they dated for several years. They were then engaged, and this is no typo, for 18 years before Donna finally relented to Billy and they got married. They've been married for 30 years. And the two of them did a beautiful job of welding together the broken pieces that were left behind by Donnie's death and gave Donnie Jr. the family he needed to grow up with and the love, kindness, and security that every child deserves. Now, there's a lot of time that's passed, and we've all grown older. Donnie Jr. is now 54 and is a property manager. In one of life's funny ways of connecting generations, when Donnie Jr. had a chance to get a vanity plate for his car, he chose DT22 because he liked the number 22. What he didn't know was that was also the number that Donnie Sr. wore when he played football in the Boston Park League. So let me close with this. With the help and support of her family, her friends, and Billy Cashins, Donna picked up the pieces of that shattering loss of her young husband, made a life for herself and her young son. What today is about is remembering and honoring those two and the two families that were rocked by the loss of Don Turner. That should remind the rest of us of the very high price that so many pay to keep this nation free. Yes, we must never forget, and we must bless the names on this memorial. We must bless those men who come every year and stand along that fence. And we must bless the fallen. God bless them and their loved ones who have paid so much for the freedom that the rest of us enjoy. Thank you.
All right, hold on a second. And thank you, Governor Baker. As I said, the governor is the first governor to be here in 41 years, but also he's been governor while we've had two conventions in this city from the Medal of Honor Society, and was a great supporter at both of those conventions. Once again, my good friend Tom Steiner last year, as a gift to all the Medal of Honor recipients, painted our memorial with the veterans standing around it, but included the Medal of Honor flag to represent the convention here in Boston. And so, Governor, from Tom Steiner, myself, there's only 3 prints that have the signatures of the Medal of Honor recipients who visited our memorial. And we'd like to present it to you to say thank you for being such a great supporter, not only of our memorial, but all the memorials here in the Commonwealth. Thank you, Governor. I want to acknowledge the Commissioner for the City of Boston Veteran Services, Rob Santiago, Secretary of the Department of Veteran Services in the state, Cheryl Poppy. Joining us today, too, is the Commanding Officer of 25th Marines, Colonel Jonathan Smith, and the CEO for Recruiting, Major Chris Flood. Thank you for being here today. I want to give a special shout out to my good friend and the man I say was responsible for allowed me to be able to do what I've been doing in the veterans community for over 40 years. The former mayor of Boston and the ambassador to the Vatican, Ray Flynn. Ray, and thank you for being here. Our next speaker is the mayor of the City of Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu. This is not the first time Mayor Wu, as she makes her way up, has been to our memorial. This past April, as we celebrated Medal of Honor Day, we were really proud to have Mayor Wu join us as we recognized and remembered the Medal of Honor recipients from South Boston, as well as all those Medal of Honor recipients. Ladies and gentlemen, Michelle Wu.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is truly a deep honor to be here with so many who serve, have served, and all who continue to remember and ensure that this city stays grounded in the values and the sacrifice that so many who come before us have laid down. Now, I am still relatively new in this position, learning the ins and outs, and so it's an honor to be here for the first time in my capacity as mayor. I, of course, like all of my other colleagues in government, took the instructions and orders very seriously, but now I learned from the governor that apparently the time limit piece did not apply so much, so I followed it very closely. Now I know for next year I could delve into a little more detail, but it is an honor always to be with Tommy and all those in our community who ensure that Boston continues to lead the way nationally in remembering and standing up for service. Today I'm going to speak a little bit about Sergeant Edward Walter Milan. He served in the 5th Weather Squadron in the U.S. Air Force, first joining in the Navy, and then later joining the Air Force to serve as a meteorologist, his dream. The names on this memorial represent families, futures, and the many pathways, years that lay ahead of the young people, and in this case the young men who served their community. And so Sergeant Milan was living out a bit of his dream already, but in March of 1968, 54 years ago, his dream was cut short by a mortar attack. Now, the number 54 doesn't lend itself to nice and neat commemorations, but just like the grief and loss that our Gold Star families feel and that our community members and friends and family feel, it exists on its own timeline. Whether it's 1 year, 50 years, or more, that hole left behind by someone in our community doesn't go away, and instead over time we fill it with loving memory in that space for the good times. The sound of their voice, that look, the expression that they make. Thank you. And that's why the memorials like this are so important. Sergeant Milan left a legacy in his own family as well. And so I want to recognize Ms. Milan, Sister Sharon Colson, Ryan, Sergeant Milan's nephew, who is now serving in the Navy, following in his uncle's footsteps as well. We will never forget Sergeant Milan's bravery and sacrifice, and continue to come here every year, every few months, to ensure that in this neighborhood, this community, who stepped up more so proportionally than anywhere else, that legacy of service continues on, and how the City of Boston reaches out and provides services to families and to our returning service members. I want to thank especially our Veterans Commissioner, Commissioner Santiago, for being ever present in this community and ensuring that we continue to keep improving how we can bring more and more of our veterans into the City of Boston's service program and ensure that we are reaching every single family. Thank you also. I want to mention that our Parks Commissioner was here, Ryan Woods, for keeping this park looking beautiful and so many across the city, and our South Boston liaison, Anna White, who ensures that all of the programming that we do across the city is deeply connected to this neighborhood as well. Thank you so much to our Gold Star families, to all of our veterans. Thank you for your service, and we will never forget.
Thank you, Mayor Wu. The first quote is from Bobby Guerrero. I would say that what means the most to me is that I am proud and honored to be able to come back every year to honor our friends and fellow veterans and never forget their sacrifice. Bobby Sanchez wrote, "The South Boston Vietnam Memorial states, 'If you forget my death, then I died in vain.' It moves me that this motto remains instilled 40 plus years in the hearts and minds of fellow veterans, friends, and families of the 25. I will read more as the program goes along, but now I'd like to introduce our state senator, who has been here as a representative and now here as our state senator, Nick Collins.
Good morning, and thank you to Tommy Lyons and the South Boston Vietnam War Memorial Committee for bringing us together here today, and for over 4 decades of leadership, not just for South Boston Vietnam veterans, but for veterans across our city, Commonwealth, and nation. On this most reverent occasion here in South Boston, I have the privilege of speaking with you all about the late Eddie Sullivan, a son of Southie who made the ultimate sacrifice in Vietnam. I want to thank his brother Kevin Sullivan, who is here today, as he has always been, for taking the time to share with me some of his memories and thoughts of his older brother, Eddie Sullivan. The Sullivans, as many of you know, are a great family. I grew up with Eddie's nieces and nephews, including Kevin's son, Michael, who, as luck would have it, married a classmate and friend of mine from Babson College, making Kevin and Nancy the proud grandparents of Tyler, Sophie, and Carly. And I know I'm biased when I say this, but his best move was marrying a Collins. Just want to say thank you to Kevin and the entire family for allowing me to share with everyone a little bit more about your brother, uncle, and great-uncle Eddie Sullivan. Eddie Sullivan was born on November 22nd, 1948, the oldest of 6 kids, 3 boys and 3 girls. One could say that he was a leader by birth. A Gaiety kid through and through, Eddie went to the Gate of Heaven School, grades 1 through 8, with the likes of friends such as the late Buddy Sanchez. Eddie Sullivan hung out at H and 4th with the, quote, hobos, as the late Dodo Nee used to describe them during his childhood. Eddie, Dodo Nee, Dennis Flynn, and Wilbur Hearn, to name a few. Eddie Sullivan was well liked and well respected among his peers. In high school, Eddie was known for his athleticism, particularly football, baseball, and boxing. Eddie started out playing football in what was then the South Boston Amateur 14 and under football league, with the Raiders identifying Eddie Sullivan as their top player. He got his start in baseball with Marsh Garfolding under legendary coach John Injun Horn, and boxing, of course, took place up at the Muni. After graduating from South Boston High School in 1966, Eddie enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, along with some of his friends from Southie, like Davey Malcolm, Pat Finn, Fuzzy Tracy, and Bill Meyer, to name a few. While serving in the Marine Corps, Eddie took on the role of combat photographer. On his last mission, a volunteer mission, near the end of his tour, he was struck and killed by an IED. June 9, 1968, at the age of 19. When asked, Eddie's brother Kevin, who was 13 at the time, said he often thinks about his brother Eddie's life and what it would have been like if he had made it home from Vietnam. For his brother Eddie is forever 19 in his mind, in the memory of that of his family. That's why it's important that we come here today for the families of the fallen. They too have been robbed of the holiday gatherings, the brotherly advice, the birthdays, nieces, nephews, grandkids, robbed of what would have been and what should have been. It's important that we are here today because what Eddie Sullivan and every one of the men we honor here today sacrificed wasn't just their lives, but a chance at their own American dream to start a career, start a family, and build a life in our free society. Something that they had foregone to stand up and preserve our nation's freedom in the face of great opposition and consternation here at home and abroad, so that we can continue to enjoy the luxury of living in the greatest country in the world. And we know our freedom doesn't come free. Eddie Sullivan's family and the families of the 25 men from South Boston who paid the ultimate price in Vietnam, and all our Gold Star families know this all too well. So it is with great awe that I come up here every year, and even more so now, having learned about the men, their lives, who they were, who they may have become, and how deep their sacrifices truly were. So I want to end by saying God bless our Vietnam veterans and all the veterans that serve our service men and women, in particular currently serving in harm's way. May they return home safely to a grateful nation. Thank you to Kevin and the Sullivan family and all of our Gold Star families, to Tommy Lyons and the committee in the community of South Boston. It is an honor and privilege to represent you in the Massachusetts Senate. Thank you.
I would like now to call upon our Congressman, Stephen Lynch. I was going to have our Congressman finish the program, but we're running a little later than I thought we were. So Congressman Lynch, again, has been here time and time again. And when it was suggested that elected officials speak about someone, he knew right away who he wanted to speak about. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our Congressman, Stephen Lynch.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank the Marine Corps and Navy Color Guards who were here earlier for their great work. And also to the Boston Fire Department pipe and drum back there. They do a wonderful job every single year. Thanks for your kindness. And I do want to acknowledge how great our governor has been and our mayor. You know, they are all in on this, and they really understand the importance and what this means to this neighborhood. So we've been greatly served by them today. I also got instructions on the time limit, Tom, and I obeyed that just for the record, because I did know that so many would be spoken about here. For me, the choice was quite easy. I only knew two of our fallen heroes personally. Joe Agri, who was the top of the list, and I was afraid of him, and James K. Wheeler, Jimmy Wheeler. So they hung around the projects with us. I grew up in the old colony housing projects. They called us low-income families back then. I asked my dad once, I said, were we poor? And he said, there were times when we had to save up to be poor. But James K. Wheeler, Jimma Wheeler, just to put this in context, so if you drive up East 8th Street, you know there's a big curve right as you get near, after you go by Gate Street going up towards Old Harbor Street. On the right hand side there's a tunnel there in the projects. Jimma Wheeler lived in the first floor apartment right there. Had a younger sister, Betty, who was close to me in age. Jimma was about 12 years older than me. So in the pecking order down the projects, you know, it all went by age. So it was the sworn obligation and duty of the older kids to terrorize the younger kids, and that was just the way of the projects in those days. But I remember Jimma Wheeler. You did not mess with Jimma Wheeler. He was in great shape. You know, he was a good athlete. Like I say, oh, he had a younger daughter too. I know that he had a younger daughter. They called her Terry. I think her name was Teresa. But you know, and I also remember the kind of the gang that he hung around with. Richie Higgins was sort of the unofficial mayor in the Higgins family in those days down in the projects, and I know those two guys were tight. But in my mind's eye, you know, I can recall one of the last times I saw Jimma before he enlisted. You know, he was really fit. I remember we were playing bar ball. I don't know if you remember that game in the projects, but you know, you hit the ball with your fist. And as soon as the younger kids were playing at the time, but as soon as those younger kids, the older kids came into the courtyard, they just shoot us right out of there and took over. But I remember Jimma, and you know, he was totally fit, zero body fat, and a great athlete. And he wore his hair, you know, well, he looked a lot like James Dean, the movie star. You know, that he had that. Even his picture today, if you see it, you know, is reminiscent of that. His official photo, the military photo. But he wore his hair in sort of the Elvis Presley style, and at least until the Army got a hold of him. And you know, I was, like I say, I was about 10 years old. He was about 12 years older than me, and we just held those guys in awe in terms of who they were and what they represented. Jimma was in his second tour of duty in Vietnam when he was killed. He was a Specialist 6th class, he served with the 125th Infantry Division when he was killed by a rocket attack and died instantly in Hua Ninh province. I've been to Vietnam a few times now with the POW MIA Accounting Command, and Hua Ninh province is just west of what was then Saigon. Now it's Ho Chi Minh City, but not far from the Cambodian border. What I would ask is this, that like so many of the Gold Star families, Jimma's family carried this burden for a long time. And it is devastating. It is devastating. I remember when the news came back to the projects that day, well, shortly after he was killed. And it was crushing to the families who knew him and loved him and knew his family. It was a small community. I remember how the moms were affected. It was just devastating. And as Governor Baker talked about and grew emotional over, that unspeakable loss was carried by his family every single day. And I would just ask that, you know, you say a quiet prayer, not only for Jimma Wheeler, but also to his family that carried that loss, like I say, every day. But Jimma Wheeler and the men whose names are on this monument were the very best of us. They were the best of us. They stand as a shining example of what's best about South Boston and best about America. And I think it's important that we remember that Jimma Wheeler and the men on this wall, they fought for the United States. They fought for America. But to them, as young men, South Boston was their America. It was these streets, these families, this neighborhood. That's who they fought for. That's why they served. Almost every single one on this wall, their father served in World War II or Korea. And military service and patriotism was part of who they were. I also want to thank the men at the rail and Tommy Lyons, because they have poured their hearts into this effort to remember their friends. They have poured their hearts into this, and they're here every single year to keep faith with their brothers in arms. And that is so noble and so meaningful in this time of division, that they remember, and it's all about the 25 men on this wall. So I was delighted to hear that Tom had come up with an idea for us to speak about the men in the flesh, who they were, and of the personal tragedy of their loss to this community. So thank you for keeping faith. Thank you, Tom, for keeping faith. For all these many years. God bless you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Lynch. Our State Representative, David Beal. If you...
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here today with our veterans, Gold Star families, active service members, neighbors, and colleagues in government on this important day for our community. Every September, we gather here to remember the 25 sons of South Boston who made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of their community, their neighborhood, and their country during the Vietnam War. Their names are engraved on this memorial, one of the first permanent memorials in the United States to honor those who gave their lives in Vietnam. We are here today, gathered in this sacred place, because of the efforts and leadership of South Boston's Vietnam veterans to honor the service and sacrifice of their friends and neighbors. Your service to your country and your dedication to your fallen brothers manifested here are an example to us all. Thank you. As we rededicate the South Boston Vietnam Memorial, I have the privilege of sharing the story and heroism of one man whose name is engraved, Lance Corporal John Caldwell Calhoun, United States Marine Corps. Born on April 19, 1947, Corporal Calhoun attended South Boston High School, graduating with honors in 1965. He was a member of the Pierre Marquette Knights of Columbus, and one of his main passions in life was art, winning the American Gold Key Art Award and a scholarship to the MFA. Corporal Calhoun enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in July 1966 and arrived in Vietnam in August 1967. On January 7, 1968, Corporal Calhoun was serving as an automatic rifleman with Combined Action Platoon H6, 3rd Combined Action Group, 3rd Marine Amphibious Force. While defending a compound in the Thu Thien province, Corporal Calhoun's platoon suddenly came under a heavy volume of mortar and rocket fire, followed by an aggressive assault by a numerically superior Viet Cong force. The enemy quickly seized the northern wall of the compounds as the Marines moved to the southern wall. During the ensuing firefight, the Marines became dangerously low on munitions. In realizing the seriousness of their situation, Corporal Calhoun ran across 30 meters of fire-swept terrain without hesitation to obtain much-needed ammunition and returned it to his brothers in arms. Ignoring the dangers around him, Corporal Calhoun repeatedly crossed this hazardous area to resupply his platoon until he was fatally wounded. Ultimately, his heroic actions were instrumental in repelling the enemy force that day. For his heroism and extraordinary actions on January 7th, 1968, Corporal Calhoun was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. The 25 men who died protecting this country and whose names are on this memorial are heroes. Today and every day, let us honor and remember these heroes for their incredible sacrifice and keep in our hearts and prayers their Gold Star families, knowing that while we will never be able to repay them, we must never forget their sacrifice and their service. God bless.
And thank you, David. I want to thank the UE team from Plymouth, Massachusetts, who came up today with the UE helicopter once again to join us. It's a great way to reflect on our service in Vietnam to see the UE. So thank you to the Plymouth UE team. Danny Murata wrote, "Hopefully the lives they gave made us better men with a better future." Pat Nee wrote, "That day in September is a day of pride, of love for my fellow veterans, and sorrow for the 25 men who didn't make it back to the community of South Boston. The 5 men who made it possible did a great service for all our veterans in America." And Paulie Evans wrote, "I'm not only proud but moved by the fact that for 40 years, South Boston Vietnam veterans, families and friends and neighbors have lived up to and will continue to live up to the challenge of our wall. If you forget my death and I died in vain, we have not and will not forget our 25 friends." It's my pleasure now to introduce the President of the City Council, Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Tommy. I'm honored to be here for this 41st anniversary of the rededication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Let me personally honor the bravery and service of PFC John Henry Cole, United States Marine Corps. The respected Cole family lived in St. Bridget Parish, and John was the oldest of 7 children. The hero square at that intersection of O and 3rd is in his memory. John Henry Cole was born March 9, 1948, graduated from South Boston High School, and described by his friends and family as a big, likable guy with a tremendous sense of humor who especially enjoyed a good joke. John played football for the O'Connell Club and the Moakley Senators, and was active in South Boston youth sports. After high school, he worked for the Boston Herald Traveler before enlisting in the Marines. Cole served with the 3rd Marine Division and began his tour May 1968. On November 10th, 1968, when PFC Cole was stationed at Fire Support Base in Quang Tri, Vietnam, the base was struck by rockets and John suffered fragmentation wounds to his head and body and made the supreme sacrifice to our nation. He is a recipient of the Purple Heart Navy Presidential Unit Citation for heroism in combat, survived by his parents, siblings, neighbors in a proud South Boston neighborhood. John did not have the opportunity to be a husband, a father, a grandfather. His sacrifice reminds us that when we lose someone, the pain never goes away. We think of that absence, the pain, and all the milestones and experiences that never took place. That pain stays with the family of the fallen, the Cole family, and leaves you wondering all that never took place. It reminds us that this sacrifice is supreme, and we must honor the fallen and their families too. The returning South Boston Vietnam veterans built this memorial to honor all those who served in Vietnam and never returned home. And we remember them as heroes. Each September, the Cole family and friends return to this historic memorial and park as we pray for him and the other South Boston Vietnam veterans. I'm proud to say that a member of the Cole family is my cousin, Diane Coyne Cole, who is married to Paul Cole, the younger brother of an American hero, John Cole. The Cole family knows that being together with 25 other South Boston families in September that also lost a loved one in Vietnam is terribly important. It's comforting. And knowing that the South Boston neighborhood also shares in that same grief and that same pain. On the mantle of the Cole home was a picture of South Boston Marines going off to service, to basic training. In that photo included Tommy Steiner, Tommy Gill, Paul Evans, Tommy Lyons, and Paul Lombard. As many people mentioned on the back of this wonderful memorial, if you forgot my death, then I died in vain. And today, on the 41st anniversary of this rededication, we return to tell you that we did not forget, and we will never forget. You and your fallen brothers represented the very best of us. You served as an example for generations of South Boston servicemen and women who came after you. To the South Boston Vietnam veterans that are here today, the men along the rail, thank you for your heroic service and for your sacrifice and your family's sacrifice as well. You came home from war, but you never stopped serving our community and country. You built this memorial to remember your fallen friends and heroes. You led the way and reminded us all never to forget. Time never heals the loss of a child, a loved one, but knowing we gather here every September to rededicate the memorial as a neighborhood, to always remember their sacrifice, their life, and family is incredibly important. We will always honor the memory of our fallen heroes and Gold Star families. John Henry Cole and the heroic Vietnam veterans brought us together as a neighborhood and country once again. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce now City Council Representative Michael Flaherty, who always reminds me when I see him that he was a young boy when we first dedicated this Vietnam Memorial.
Thank you, Tommy. It is an honor to be here and standing in front of all of you, and it's a privilege to know you, so many of you personally. And it's also a privilege for me to represent the Joyce family today in recognizing and honoring the service of John G. Joyce, Corporal, United States Army, born September 9th, 1945. Affectionately known as Johnny to all who knew and loved him, son of Mary Carter Joyce and Martin Joyce, brother to Marty, Mary, Dan, and Kevin. Dan was very helpful in providing some information. Born and raised in the Old Harbor Projects, Johnny attended the Monsignor Patterson Grammar School in B and Third. He was an excellent student. He went on to Boston Latin School and then on to Boston State College, where he developed a passion for Spanish language. John was a hard worker. He worked nights at the post office to put himself through college. He was smart, handsome, charismatic, and athletic. Played all sports in the town, particularly baseball. Played for the legendary Mocha Mahoney for the Exchange Club. You all know how legendary the Exchange Club was. But as good a baseball player as he was actually an even better basketball player. Known to be a team leader, team scorer, and a fierce rebounder, played for his mentor, Ray Flynn. Johnny, like most Southie kids, started to give back to his community at an early age, working as a lifeguard at Carson Beach, coaching CYO basketball down at St. Monica's, and also interning in our Boston Public Schools. Johnny wanted to be a Spanish teacher in the Boston Public Schools when he returned from Vietnam. Johnny died February 24th, 1969 in Kuntum, Vietnam, at the age of 24. He is remembered on this wall. He's also remembered down at the Old Harbor Projects of the basketball court. He's also on a hero square at G and Broadway, where the Carters, his grandmother and their family, spent a lot of time as a youth. The South Boston community will never forget Johnny's service. May he continue to rest in peace. May God bless his Gold Star family and all of our Gold Star families. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Donna Cashins wrote, "The most important thought I have over 4 decades is that no one forgot Donnie. I still get excited, even after 40 plus years, to go to the Vietnam Memorial. To see everyone is a joy I can't explain. My son loves to hear our stories about the good old days. It's remarkable that we are getting that old." She wanted to thank the committee and all the volunteers and all the veterans and everyone who attends. This day is a hallmark to all our veterans in South Boston. And I'll close with Dan Evans, who wrote, "South Boston has been a bedrock of patriotism. One only has to look at Dorchester Heights, where George Washington repelled the British from Boston Harbor. Most, if not all, of our parents endured the hell of World War II. Being steeped in patriotism, the men, actually boys, represented to call during the Vietnam War. Although Vietnam was widely opposed to, South Boston responded with no fear. The men whose names appear on this monument are truly heroes. May God bless their souls. Rest in peace, my brothers." At this time, I would like to have the families of Eddie Mylan and Donna Turner to please step forward to place the wreath on behalf of the families. Thank you. Representing the Vietnam veterans, Tom Steiner and Peter Finnegan, if you'd step forward, please. Thank you. I thought it appropriate our third wreath would be placed by the commanding officer from USS Constitution, Commander Farrell. Also, the commanding officer, the 25th Marines, General Jonathan Smith. Flowers. Thank you. I am honored to read the South Boston Vietnam Memorial Honor Roll. Agri, Joseph, Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps. Bazzanotti, Charles, First Lieutenant, United States Army. Borovic Richard, Specialist 4th Class, United States Army. Calhoun John C., Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps. Cole John Henry, PFC, United States Marine Corps. Daly Paul M., Specialist 6th Class, United States Army. Delverde Ronald L., PFC, United States Marine Corps. Desmond Joseph F., PFC, United States Marine Corps. Dunn Joseph F., PFC, United States Marine Corps. Edmund Devin M., Sergeant, United States Army. Grover Gene D., Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. Ubisac Frank C., PFC, United States Army. Eitri Douglas J., Specialist 5th Class, United States Army. Jacobs John P., Corporal, United States Marine Corps. Joyce John G., Corporal, United States Army. Myland Edward W., Sergeant, United States Air Force. O'Toole James, PFC, United States Army. Peterson Burton, Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps. Sheehan Paul H., First Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. Stewart James J., PFC, United States Marine Corps. Stone Edward, PFC, United States Marine Corps. Sullivan Edward M., PFC, United States Marine Corps. Thomas Joseph E., PFC, United States Marine Corps. Turner Donald J., Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps. Wheeler James K., Specialist 6th Class, United States Army. In the service of their country, Lance Corporal Daniel Powers, United States Marine Corps. Sergeant Nicholas Buddy Sanchez, United States Air Force. May they rest in peace.
I'm ready to be made. Look.
want to give a special thank you to the Greater Boston Firefighter Pipes and Drums who are here every year with us. Thank you. If you forget my death, then I died in vain. These words do not speak about bravery or valor, duty or honor. In fact, they do not speak to the dead or about them. They speak to us, the living. For it is us who have been charged with the awesome responsibility of giving meaning and yes, even life to the ultimate sacrifice they made on our behalf. If we, the family, the friends, and the veterans they left behind, do not take the time or make the commitment to remember, then their deaths indeed will have been in vain. Thank you for remembering. Thank you.